Um, the doctrine of flux and the unity of opposites. According to Plato and Aristotle, Heraclitus believed extreme views that led to logical incoherence. Everything is constantly changing, and opposites are actually identical, so that everything is and is not at the same time. In other words, universal flux and the identity of opposites entail a denial of the law of non-contradiction. Now, this, you'll notice, is absolutely applicable to Marxism, because Marxism's praxiology necessitates the acceptance of contradictions, you see. This is what I was trying to illustrate. And a lot of people don't know this. The reason that you can't have a debate with a Marxist is because Marxists don't have the same presuppositions about what laws of history, laws of logic, and facts are. They're not what you think they are. All of these things are merely tools in the toolkit to engage in revolutionary action. You're not entering into a debate with a committed, serious Marxist to figure out the truth. For them, debate is an action of praxis by which they contradict, engage in power relations to further the dialectic, to oppose you at all costs, and to oppose each other. In fact, Marxism necessitates that each generation of Marxists oppose the previous generation of Marxists. And until you understand that, you will never understand this system. You will be thinking that you're figuring out some law of history, some deterministic, scientific structure of the phases of history. And that's not what Marxism is. Until you realize that Marx intentionally and had no problem contradicting himself and modifying the system and doing things that contradicted it, it will never make sense to you. But notice the statement there. Everything is flux and changing. Opposites are identical. The higher level Marxists even discuss this and talk about it, because I believe Marxism was actually run out of London and New York. And so when we go to the higher level Marxists like H.G. Wells can say monopoly capitalism is no different than Marxism, Leninism, Trotskyism. Because opposites are ultimately identical and they're all moving towards the synthesis. So capitalism must clash with Marxism, communism. But the product is not either one. The product is the synthesis. The product is Klaus, not Stalin, not Tiny Mustache Man. Those are all just lower level dialectical manifestations. And not even Dave Rockefeller and his moneyed elite. Until you understand this and the law of opposites and the contradictions and the embracing of contradiction for the purpose of embracing the dialectic and the philosophy of process, you cannot understand the system. You will be arguing against nothing, pointlessness, straw men, red herrings. And all of the Marxists who don't understand this, who are just dumb ideologues and low IQ dupes, college goobers, they are also dupes of this, trapped in the dialectic. All this, by the way, is actually also outlined in the Rakovsky interrogation. Interesting. Rakovsky says everything that I'm saying. Interesting. Wonder why that would be. Why would he say everything I'm saying? Now, I didn't come to this through reading the Rakovsky interrogation. I came to this through a lot of years of reading and studying under Marxists. And yet the famous NKVD interrogation of the Trotskyite Christian Rakovsky has Rakovsky stating everything that I'm telling you. There is the link to the Rakovsky interrogation if you want to go down that rabbit hole. So that's enough with Heraclitus, because I think we can see the fundamental ideas in Heraclitus of revolutionary metaphysics, right? Everything is in flux. Now, again, he's still couched within the idea of explaining a universal metaphysical truth, right? So it's not until we get post-Enlightenment where we get supposedly the rejection of metaphysics after David Hume and after Immanuel Kant that later Marxists will then begin to say we are anti-metaphysics, even though it's contradictory, because they affirm metaphysics every time they talk about states of reality, about universal claims about what is or is not the case. Is and is not are statements of existence. Those are predicates of what exists and what does not exist. Materialism is the case. That's a metaphysical statement. It's an ontological statement, to be more precise, because it's a statement of what being is. What is the type of being of which all things exist? It is matter, they say. Matter is the fundamental of all existence. So even though they might give credence to ideas, in my view, that's just a contradiction. Okay, you can't give an account for ideas. You realize that your system needs ideas to be coherent, and it also needs things like laws. But you have a contradiction in the system whereby you don't have an account for a justification for the belief in ideas or in laws of logic. Thus, they then revert to embracing contradictions, and they make the system unfalsifiable, because they will say if you are engaged in arguing against them, you are arguing from the position of bourgeoisie. So in other words, every argument against Marxism is already immediately invalidated because it comes from a bourgeois opposition to Marxism. So it's an unfalsifiable system, you see. And that, by the way, is a common weak point, a crack in any so-called system, right? Because the system has to, it's like much like the papacy. You can't argue against the papacy because the papacy is infallible. Well, what about all the time was where a contradiction, it's no longer teaching correctly, and Francis is teaching heresy? Oh, well, those were never infallible declarations, you see. So it's a ever-moving goalpost, which then makes the system unfalsifiable. But unfalsifiable systems are usually false systems. They're always false systems. So there we have the key figure of Heraclitus.